Welcome, Mandy. Welcome and Happy New Year, actually 2025.
Happy New Year. It's going to be a juicy one, or as the young people say, it's going to be lit.
It is. And actually, you and I were talking about experimentation. So I have to just really own up to this, that this is an experiment because this is the first time I am live on Instagram.
Yay!
And I think there is going to be a lag. Can you hear my lag? Can you hear me? Okay, fabulous. I'm going to go back to, I think there is, but it doesn't really matter. I think for me, it's just you and I talking about the backstory. We're talking about this experiment this time last year. So
we were
in 4PC with James. We were talking about this possibility of doing some lives, and you are the queen of podcasts with Enough the Podcast, which is, a phenomenal, globally well-known and playful podcast. And I was never really yet taken to do a podcast. And this whole idea about doing a LinkedIn Live came about. And here in February, I started it as a playful experiment. And I found it really, easy and easeful and joyful. My one word for last year was joy, and this year is easeful. And I sort of decided to take it in 2025 and experiment.
And here we are, 28 episodes in.
I know, this is episode 28, and I'm so excited to actually celebrate it with you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I mean, again, when in the spirit of playfulness, because you are a big role model of playfulness for me. My sort of 3 words, the 3 E's were experimentation, which we're going to do today, the easefulness, which I'm taking into 2025, and then the excitement. I'm very excited to start the new year of the Audacious Conversations with you.
Thank you. Let's get into it.
So, the other thing that you and I were talking about is sort of 3 P's, and I was really struggling with, I said it has to be practical, because you and I both love that.
So we got one, practical.
And then it's playful, and I was struggling with the 3P. And then you came up with it.
And I said, let's make it pleasurable, because this is one of the things I am really thinking a lot about as I think about my podcast and the book that I'm working on and the whole concept of enough. What is enough? And I think when we start to put some constraints, some creative constraints around what is enough, how much is enough money? How much is enough cool clothes? How much is enough clients? How much is enough, whatever it is? The answer for most of us, that insidious answer, is usually more. And what I started to get really curious about this year is, well, how much is actually enough? And I'm playing with the idea of, what if it wasn't more? What if it was about alignment? What if it was about less, but more aligned? What if it was about living to honor my capacity, my time capacity, my energetic capacity, my physical capacity? And that's actually what started me thinking about that 3rd P, which was so easy for me to throw into the mix, is playfulness is also about pleasure. It's about having fun. It could be sensuous pleasure. It could be food. It could be drink. It could be expressing yourself with clothes. It could be travel. It could be, buying 400 thread count Egyptian cotton sheets, whatever your jam is. But that is really starting to think about putting those constraints on what is enough. Because if we are constantly in that machine of more, we get caught in that turbine, and life gets sucked of all joy and pleasure, because we're in this mindless pursuit of something that we don't even know how much is enough. And I think that's what really got me thinking about less but better. And when there's more space, which is really something I'm cultivating intentionally this year, because I notice I'm happier, I'm healthier, I'm nicer to be around, I'm more creative, I have more spontaneity, and it's just everything's better when there's more space. And that's actually when you're on that kind of proverbial Maslowian hierarchy, you can start to think about something delicious like pleasure. Because when we're in that turbine of just hustling more, when we're not even clear what that means for us, we lose touch with what actually gives us joy, what gives us pleasure, what gives us a sense of like, isn't it good to be alive? Because we're just on that gerbil wheel, going and going and going. And I think a new year, I mean, every day is a new beginning, right? But New Year's are opportunities for us to put a crowbar in that machinery of the moreness, constantly, relentlessly. And yes, I'm acknowledging this is a privilege to be able to do this. Being able to slow down and think about what if it's about less? What if it's not about more? And what if less gives us opportunity to have more of what we want? Whether that's fun, play, pleasure, whatever it might be for you. So that's the intention that I'm bringing into the new year.
I love that, Mandy. And actually, I think for us, because, setting the intention and making it practical, why don't we play with it in a practical way? And sort of, and just bring it, what's in and what's out with this theme of less is more, and I even started the year saying less words, more impact, because it's one of my own challenges. I tend to sometimes, my daughter has been really challenging me in the last few weeks, is mum. So, just go tell me the point. So that's definitely something that I'm going to optimize. Talking about optimization, you and I had our own Audacious Conversation number 9 in April last year, and I titled it, "What are you optimizing for?" So let's play that. What are you living out, behind? And then what are you taking in 25?
Oh, I love an in and out list. So I think one of my ins is definitely coming back to what I was just talking about. For me, this year is more pleasure. I don't know what that exactly means yet. It might be eating more green things. It might be, I just bought some really beautiful earrings, which I have to obviously show you. These are unusual. These are audacious. Look, they match, but they don't match. And I love them because they're a bit playful. They actually have they've got a name. They're called The Unexpected Rise of the French Taco, which makes me laugh. I don't know why they're called that, but that feels like pleasure for me. It's fun, it's playful, it's a little bit unexpected. So pleasure is definitely in for me. What is out for me in 2025 is feeling fried, feeling terribly brittle and serious, and everything just like feeling like a yoke on my shoulders. I am no longer available for that. Speak to me in 6 weeks, but that's my intention going into it anyway. So in with more pleasure, play, experimentation of whatever that looks like, out with feeling fried, feeling overwhelmed.
I love that. I think for me, what's definitely in is ease and easefulness, because that's the choice of my one word for 25, which means that I'm going to sort of live out all of that striving and working hard and my own pattern of a rescuer that you and I were talking about. Is like, I can rescue you. I can do it for you. I can fix it for you, which is, I find myself going back in that pattern, and it's been a pattern for a long time in family and work. So it's I am intentional about it. I am aware of it, and I am definitely going to do less of that.
And I guess to those kind of patterns that we're leaving out, there's always a payoff to those patterns, right? So when you go into rescuer mode, there's a payoff to that. But I think part of the in column is starting to realize that there's also a payoff to making a new choice, as opposed to, the brain is a marvelous piece of technology, but it's a lazy piece of meat. It wants to make everything automated. So if you're used to being a rescuer, I'm there for you too, alongside you. I'm used to, the whole drama triangle. I camped out there with barbecue and everything for years, because it's just a habit of staying in there until you consciously get tired of your own BS and think, enough. I am now consciously going over here and I'm choosing something different. It sounds so easy to say it like that. I'm choosing something different, and it has its own payoff. So it sounds so frivolous and so fripperous to think, oh, optimizing for pleasure and playfulness and creativity and all of those things. It sounds so fluffy. But the thing is, I think, controversial opinion, I think it's the core of so much of our intentional productivity, of our radiance, of our life force, of our ability to influence, our ability to impact. So by you choosing more ease and more easefulness, and by really getting clear, what does that mean for you and your year? What does that mean for you and your family? What does that mean for you and your partner, for you and your business, you within yourself? What does that mean? And getting clear that there's also a payoff to making that choice, because there's a funhouse slide right into the rescuing. You know, it's so familiar. The brain is like, oh, been there, done that, feels familiar. It doesn't matter if it sucks. The brain just knows it feels familiar, and there's a payoff.
Yes. And you, I mean, it's talking about payoff, and I'd love to, because you had, Dr. Anna Lemke, I think, on yours, is about that pain and pleasure. It's the same, in the sort of dopamine brain. And you had, do you call it Judgy Janet, don't you? And I think it's in my book, I have the rescuer Jenny. So my avatar is Jenny, the rescuer, which is probably, a lot of my clients, but it's also my own pattern. And it's fascinating how that brain works in scientifically. Having listened to your podcast last night, I think it's only just released, and it's probably highly recommended to anyone who hasn't yet listened to.
Thank you. That one actually I recorded 2 years ago.
Oh,
but
wow.
I'm on a I had that conversation with her in 2023, and I thought it's such a good time to bring that episode out of the mothballs back into people's consciousness, because at the beginning of the year, there's so many things that she says that are really important. And many people, I've got to hit the ground running now. It's a brand new year. And how quickly our determination peters out, because she's talking about how pain and pleasure are co-located in the brain. And do go and listen to that. I think it's episode 60, and I think it's a very important conversation. And I think there's one thing that's in for me, if we go back to our in and list, is one thing that's in for me is the power of the pause. I don't know if anybody listening also, in terms of like in power tool terms, this would definitely be like a chainsaw. It's a big tool, and it can cut through a lot of things. So the ability to pause, it feels so lightweight and so simplistic, stupid simple, but the ability to pause and allow yourself sometimes to notice, oh, I'm craving, like in that episode, when I'm talking to Dr. Lemke, we're talking about addiction, work addiction, and how it's one of the things that is praised. So if somebody was addicted to crack cocaine or pornography, or, we wouldn't be like, hey, well done, brilliant, like, go you, I don't know how you do it. But yet when somebody has those behaviors where they're constantly looking for that dopamine hit of just one more email, it's one of those things that's publicly praised by our employers. We feel good about ourselves. And I think there's something there about really taking time to pause and understanding, yes, I like to be a hard worker. I want to have an impact. But when does that adaptive pattern, that adaptive ability tip over into being maladaptive? When does it start to cause harm to my physical person, to my mental health, to my relationships? So I think, people who go on holiday and struggle to switch off, if you're coming back to work and you feel more exhausted than you did because you really wanted to switch off, but you somehow couldn't manage it, I think there's a curiosity to bring into that. There's achievement and working. She talks about in the episode, these are powerful drugs.
Yes.
And we're all addictable. We live in an a very addictogenic world. I think that's what she calls it. And it's a matter of finding the key for your lock. Some people it will be whiskey. Some people it will be gambling. Some people it will be online shopping. Some people it will be working. And I think there's really the opportunity here to pause That's what I was talking about, being in that turbine of moreness. Like, it's giving us dopamine constantly. And we're stuck in this cycle of wanting more and 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 more. And the ability to pause and just recognize, like, oh, that's not feeling good to me. I'm curious about what's happening here. So I think in 2025, one on our in list is definitely the power of the pause. And out is those patterns that you were talking about, the people pleasing, the overgiving, overdoing, the I will do whatever I need to do, even though I have nothing left in my energetic tank to offer. But I will, because there's a payoff, right? Like, I get to avoid disappointing you by, I don't have to say no, but that there's power in the pause. Like, that's the real chainsaw for me, the pause.
And I'm loving this, because I am noticing, Mandy, that we are finding a lot of words, of P words. So where I was sort of struggling as I came in with just practical and playful, now every single word, I think, was, so, pause is definitely in. And that's, in order to be more present, here's another P, you have to pause, and definitely making that intentional. It's a very playful way. So, playing with pausing, which again, I am acknowledging it doesn't come easy to myself. Really genuinely stopping to pause before I embark on an action. Because for me, experimentation is such a natural default. And even this is like, I will go live and I will experiment live. What's the point of experimenting, seeing if it works? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So, and this is one of my patterns as well, is so I have to really pause and see, where does that serve me? And where do I take it a little bit too audaciously, extremely on the edge? But I love that power and people pleasing. There were another two P's. Is like, okay, out for me is people pleasing.
Can we have some jazz hands for that? I mean,
definitely. It's because I suppose it is. It's part of that rescuer pattern, and part of sometimes overly accommodating for whatever payoff that is giving me.
And I think that comes back to, if we're in people pleasing, it's a form of self-abandonment. We think it's about being kind. And I want to really offer maybe an unpopular opinion about that. I don't think it's being kind to people please. In a way, it's an avoidance where I don't have to confront. I don't have to risk disappointing you. And I think one of the ins for me, if we're going back to that list, is something I learned from one of my other podcast guests, Tamu Thomas. She left a brick of wisdom at the end of the episode, and she said, be willing to disappoint. It doesn't mean you're looking to disappoint people, or that you're trying to disappoint people. I mean, that might be taking it too far, but it's in the willingness. This is also something our mutual friend and coach, Varian Brandon, talks about. It's in the willingness. It's in the willingness to lose a friendship or a client, or that's, I think, where we have that unleashed power that we often don't use. Is it gets covered up with all those fire blankets of people pleasing and niceness, and I'll fit in, I'll be vanilla, I won't make any waves. And I think there's something there about experimenting. Some of these things on the in list, they're woven together, right? So experimenting with, what if I was willing to say what I actually wanted, or to say what needs to be said in this moment? What if I'm willing to disappoint that person because they've asked me to do something that actually the thought of doing that thing drains the life out of me and wants me to crawl in the fetal position? Like, I really don't want to do that. But then I hear myself saying, yes, sure. And we've got enough miles on our speedometers now, Alina, to know that when that thing then appears in your calendar in March or June or whatever, and you think, oh, why did I say yes to that thing? Because I see it and it just makes me want to shrivel. Energetically, I have become a raisin, and I see this thing in my diary, and I had control, and I chose to say yes to this thing. And getting curious, and the pausing, and having the willingness to disappoint somebody, that is audacious. I agree. Michael's just saying that
Michael is absolutely being willing to yes to that. And, that's being willing to disappoint is huge, because as you were explaining it, Mandy, I think I am working with a client right now, and actually that is her biggest challenge, is to disappoint people. So we were talking about this, sometimes in December at one of our sessions, and it wasn't that she's not going to do this piece of work, which, again, there is a risk that it was not going to, the outcome wasn't going to be positive. But it was a 50-50, but her fear of disappointing, the other people on the other side was absolutely paralyzing. And it's just an interesting thing to acknowledge. If you are,
but you know what? It's going through life with an eye patch. Okay.
Yes.
If thinking through, I'll use this one so that I'm hitting my microphone. I don't want to disappoint anybody. You're only getting part of the view. So if you take that eye patch off, I have been disappointing myself repeatedly. Every time I say yes to something that makes me want to shrivel up energetically, when I see it in my diary, I think, why did I say yes to that? I have been a chronic disappointer of myself because I haven't wanted to see it. I've just been walking through life like this. I don't want to disappoint anybody. But all of a sudden, when you realize that's realizing that you are no longer available for disappointing and abandoning yourself.
That's in. And I suppose for me, that's it. That's definitely in. And for me to make it again, sort of, my practical way, and I talk about that in my book as the yes and the no, I do tend to say a lot of yeses. And that's been my challenge even in the 4PC community that we've been together for a while. And that's intentional. So, saying more no's, I suppose, will be the positive affirmation of that. And less yeses.
Or if you like to say yeses, say yes to yourself.
Yes.
Because
yes to self.
Yes to self means that there's a willingness to disappoint other people. So at least you're being fair and equitable with that it's not that you're deprived of any yeses and all of those yeses must be confettied out here to other worthier people to avoid disappointing them. And that's what I mean by getting into the pause, which is on our yes list. Of if we pause and think, why am I so willing to disappoint myself? Why am I so accustomed to abandoning myself and over torquing to meet the needs of other people who I don't necessarily even like that much or potentially respect that much? Why am I so afraid to put a boundary there? Why am I so afraid to, or maybe it's not even fear, maybe that's the curiosity of what could be different to at least put myself into the equation? And is it really that terrifying to be willing to disappoint somebody? Maybe it is, but it's a muscle. The more you do it, maybe the less, at first it might feel kind of like you're skydiving or, about to do something terrifying. But we're also not responsible for the emotional responses of other adults. They're responsible for their own emotional experience. And coming back to the whole, what I stand for is this whole concept of enoughness. If we have faith and trust in our own enoughness, if I know that if I disappoint somebody and they get salty about it and they have a problem with that, those are not my people. I know who my people are. I know what it is that I need. So it's starting to build a new relationship with one's self, trusting one's self. And I noticed that as more and more, Alina, as you and I have been not necessarily intentionally going out with that in mind as a North Star, but you start to attract more of the right people into your corner who will gladly take a no and who will respect you for standing up for your own energetic capacity, who say, go sister, when you say, I really want to help. I don't have it in the tank right now. I'm focused on other things. Thank you for your grace and for your understanding. So with the right group of people, you start, and that's another in for me this year, is connection and community. Like those things are like this for me, surrounding yourself less but better, less but discerning, deeper, and people who really who really add value, and a place where I delight in adding value to their lives as well. Because what we're up to in this season of our lives is too big and too important to be done alone. And we need these creative sparring partners to be able to practice stuff like disappointing other people.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, if I would take it, audaciously even a step further, is also be willing to disappoint them too. Because that feels really edgy, for me. It's like, could I disappoint Mandy? Or, it's like, I mean, that feels scary. And yet, I suppose it's that excitement of being able to be okay with that, saying yes to excitement. Does this feel exciting? Because that's the one word that I am taking into 25. Is it exciting? Is it easeful? Is it experimental? Those sort of 3 E's. And for you, is like, is it pleasurable? So when we look at our diary in March and we see it, it's like, yay! That test has been met.
And pleasure, again, it doesn't necessarily mean like licking bars of chocolate or buying expensive pink shoes with fluffy heels, or it can mean those things. But pleasure can also mean exactly what you said, looking at your diary in 6 months' time or 6 weeks' time and realizing that today would have been that day that I was just about to say yes to that thing that I didn't actually want to say yes to. And I have a few of those things in my diary still. So it's a work in progress.
It's definitely a work in progress. I'm sort of aware that we are coming, closer to the end, and it's lovely to acknowledge some of the people who have joined us live, which is amazing. Thank you, Rita and Sarah, and Kotadia and Michael. And I think it's because what you started with, was a great comment. I think there was I can't see it anymore. Where was it? Okay, no longer available for feeling fried. I sort of made a mental note of that. So that's definitely out and not in. So what would be, I suppose, in an audacious way, Mandy, what would be the biggest in for you in 25? And then the biggest out?
I'm going to come back to the being willing to disappoint. I'm going to come back and take my orange highlighter around that one, because I've still been too available for disappointing myself. And I notice when I'm an experimenter of my own experience, that one thing I have really loved just coming out of the holiday season is I went in thinking, I'm going to read all these books, I'm going to prepare all these podcast episodes, I'm going to put all these meals in the freezer. I had like this big to-do list. And then there was part of me is like, girl, we're not doing any of that because I want to rest. And I think the being willing to disappoint not only other people, but being willing to disappoint that part of myself that wants to be in action all the time, thinking that that is the way to make the maximum impact and to get to the end of one's life fully used up. And I want to push against that. I'm going to be willing to disappoint that part of myself. I love that part of myself that is so disciplined and wants to constantly be in action, but I need to be willing to disappoint that part of myself too. So I'm being in that discomfort. It doesn't mean that's pleasurable, as in the process, I don't feel that there's pleasure in it, but what's on the other side of making some of those uncomfortable decisions is so darn delicious. So the pleasure is sometimes a delayed gratification thing of the willingness to be in temporary discomfort.
Absolutely. It's that, it's that piece of pain and pleasure which just live in the same part of the brain that we were referring to. And what I'm going to take, I think that my big in, it is the excitement, but I'm going to add the pause that you've given me today. I'm going to, that's definitely a big in where I have to stop myself more often, pausing to reflect, which is not a natural thing for me. I'm being in action and being speedy and fast. It's where I am comfortable. So again, it's going to feel uncomfortable for me, interestingly, to keep pausing. And yet I know that it's a big portal of growth for me.
The portal of pause. That sounds like a movie title.
Here we go. And actually, talking about movie title, you and I want to finish off on this because it was someone sent to me, and I forwarded to you a sort of lovely 2 minutes of Demi Moore, which I wasn't aware that she won the best female actress. And it's such a wonderful speech. It sounded like she was so taken, so unexpected. But I wrote it down. What she said: know the value of your worth. It's when you just put down the measuring stick, of that enoughness. And I thought for you, because that's what your mission is, this enoughness, and your podcast, the enough. It was so topical. So I wanted to mention that as well. And let's go for that portal of pause, or the pause portal, whichever way.
Alina, this was so much fun. What a nourishing way to start the new year. And thank you for everybody who's watched. It was really fun to play with you all.
Thank you. I mean, actually, as I said, we have no idea. We're experimenting as well. So we shall find out post event how that went on Instagram as the first time ever. And we'll take it from there. But thank you, Mandy. It's been a delight to start the year with
as you. Ever. Thank you so much, Alina.
Thank you. Thank you.